hope you're there. Tusif, yes, I can see you. Hello. Now, Tusif is actually with the University of East Anglia. He's a research scholar and an activist based at the School of International Development. And he's also a founder of the education and awareness platform on Kashmir and about the fight Islamophobia, which I think is a really pertinent piece of information and work that we really need to know more about today. And I'm looking forward to hearing your session today, Tusif. Thank you.
Thank you so very much, and hello everyone. So the time's limited and the topic's a little heavy, so I'll straight away come on to the point. But then I'll have to say, like, it has been a really enriching session listening to all of you. So what I'm going to do today is that my talk would be more of like, when we talk about racism, it's like an iceberg. What we see is the tip. So I'll try to reach to the base of it. So coming to Islamophobia, why is it important? It's important because it concerns the lives of millions of Muslim citizens. It influences multiple aspects of their daily lives, from education to work to the labor market, from universities to, from the universities to the airports, from their social life to their political engagements. This Islamophobia, it manifests everywhere in their lives. So to use Baroness Saida Wasi's term, it has already surpassed the dinner table test, meaning it has been socially sort of accepted. So what is more interesting to understand here is that many of us knowingly or unknowingly are conditioned and complicit in Islamophobia. The simple test is to ask ourselves a very simple question, that do we envision and encode events like September 11, invasion of Iraq, invasion of Afghanistan, the Paris riots, the New Zealand terrorist attack, or the genuine Palestinian or Kashmiri struggles against settler colonialism, or even the Iran crisis? Do we encode them in the lens of Islamophobia? We'll have the answer whether we are Islamophobic or not. Then the question is, why package it into racism? The simple answer is that when we simply talk about racism, it's a negative judgment or a prejudice about one or more racialized groups that are taken together as a single body, which are then inferiorized or subalternized. And flowing from there was the definition or understanding of Islamophobia of the all-party parliamentary group of the UK Parliament in 2018, who understood Islamophobia to be deeply rooted in racism and defined it to be the type of racism that targets Muslimness or perceived Muslimness. What is interesting to understand here is that the victims of Islamophobia aren't only Muslims, but all those who are perceived to be Muslims. Let us remind ourselves of the instances where many Sikhs were actually targeted because they were thought to be Muslims. Unfortunately, this definition wasn't accepted by the Tory government under the Prime Ministership of Theresa May. However, what is really important to understand here is that being critical of Islam or religion in general doesn't qualify as Islamophobia, but then direction of the hatred towards Muslims based on their faith, their practices, their heritage is the problematic one, which is actually racism and which is Islamophobia. Talking about UK, according to the Crime Survey of England and Wales, the hate crimes against Muslim adults are the highest. And apart from that, according to the UK Home Office, the total number of recorded hate crimes, 50% of them are against Muslims. So this might explain the gravity and the level of engagement and redressal that this issue of Islamophobia needs. Coming to the term Islamophobia, the term might be fairly new, but then as a phenomenon, it's quite old. It's deeply embedded in our histories, where it started or commenced as religious discrimination and then has come of age as Islamophobia. That is why, according to the anthropologist Penina Verbner, Islamophobia is a particular kind of racism that is quite reflexive, and it deeply relies on mutually constituted histories of imperial conquest, subjection, and systematic forms of oppression. What's important to understand from here is that the answers to this racism in general and Islamophobia in particular lie somewhere deep down in our history. So rewinding and taking a peek at our history, a year that is really significant is 1492. During this year, in 1492, it was the time when the Christian Spanish monarchy, it reconquered Muslim Spain. And what followed was the persecution and expulsion of Jews and Arabs from Spanish Peninsula. Simultaneously, this year marked their arrival in the non-European lands, or the Orient, like Americas. And what commenced from there was the colonization of the indigenous people. These two developments, they marked the foundation of global racial or ethnic division, where Europe itself appropriated the position of the racial or ethnic superior, bolstering the Occidental narrative of the supremacy of the West versus the rest. So here, actually, they ascribed themselves the rank where their knowledge and their roles, they were superior and supreme. For instance, internally, the Arabs and the Jews, they were considered to be the people with the wrong religion and hence the wrong God. So they were considered to be inferior to the white European Christians. And externally, the indigenous people were considered to be the people with no religion and hence no God, and they occupied the bottommost ebb of this racial hierarchy. What's really important to understand here is that the thinkers and the philosophers of that time actually propounded, proffered, and propagated these narratives and these world visions. For instance, the infamous debate between Sepulveda and Las Casas in the school of Salamanca in 1550, it led to the establishment of slave trade that transferred incredible and humongous number of humans from sub-Saharan Africa to Americas. To put things into context, Sepulveda argued that indigenous people had no soul, therefore they were not humans and could be enslaved, and they wouldn't represent sin in the eyes of the god. Whereas Las Casas argued that they were savages with a soul, so they were human enough to be Christianized and apart from being enslaved. Both these arguments, if understood properly, they represent the two broad streams of racism that has evolved ever since, the former being the biological racism and the latter being the cultural racist discourse that we are mostly encountered with today. And this was the imagination how people and the world beyond Europe was looked at. It was this lens. And what's more is that the later thinkers and philosophers actually cemented and further diffused this world vision. For instance, René Descartes. According to René Descartes' ego politics of knowledge, that is, I am, I think, therefore I am, it put the Western men, not women, it gave them the attributes of the Christian God, making them the foundation of knowledge. And this actually became the foundation of modern Western philosophy. And the contemporary scholars like Samuel P. Huntington, what they're doing is that they're actually carrying forward the same narratives. They're giving a combination of Orientalism and Occidentalism, where the superiority of the West is taken for granted, and their epistemological role or their epistemological position is taken as a given, from where they can give judgments about different people, different cultures, different religions. It is from this point of view of identity and epistemology that all other knowledges, all other cultures, all other epistemologies and world visions, they are subalternized and denigrated as myths and folklores. It is this point of view that downgrades Islam not only as a religion or spirituality, but also as a system of knowledge. So Islam and Muslim scholars and their knowledge, it is downgraded as inferior, and the Western scholars, they get the authority or the higher pedestal to create discourses and write books about Islam. It gives them the authority to downgrade Muslims as barbarians, as terrorists, as extremists, as savages, and it gives them the unilateral authority to say what's wrong with Islam and what good Muslims could do, without even making an effort for a cross-cultural or intercultural engagement. For instance, if we take Samuel P. Huntington's Clash of Civilization, it considers the main fault line for the new Cold War or the new war to be culture instead of economics or politics. And there, the real fault line is shown that Islam, it's given that Islam has an innate propensity and Muslims have an innate propensity towards violence. and they are presented to be the greatest threat to Western civilization. And it is essentialist narratives like these that create these reductionist binaries, and this might somehow explain why for Muslims around the world, especially in Europe, war on terror appears like war on Islam. Now, coming further, the basic points or basic aspects of Islamophobia on which Islam or the Muslims are bashed. The first one, the main aspect, is that West and Muslims or Islam, they are shown to be antithetical. Antithetical in the sense that the media propagates the narratives that I was talking about, the world visions, where Islam and West, they are shown to be two binaries which are quite opposite to each other, which can't coexist. The media doesn't make an effort to show or realize that neither the West nor Islam or Muslims are homogeneous or monoliths. But then this distinction and this reduction is given to the people where Islam appears to be this other or the enemy which can't coexist with the Western world or in the Western systems. Coming to other major aspect, which is terrorism or Islam as terrorism. So for this narrative, the one-size-fits-all model or the strawman that's given is the event of 9/11, September 11. But then why blame Muslims for that? The responsibility of the US government and the US foreign policy is never brought into question. It was the US government, it was the US foreign policy that created tens of thousands of Islamic or Muslim mujahideen in 1970s and 1980s against the evil empire, which was the Soviet Union. They cropped them, they groomed them, they raised them, and then it was the chicken coming home to the roost. Now, it was 1982, Ronald Reagan, the president of US, who actually invited them to the White House, and they were credited and accoladed as the spiritual or moral equivalents of the founding fathers of US. Or even if we watch the movie Rambo, it's dedicated to the gallant mujahideen of Afghanistan. Likewise, simultaneously, Saddam Hussein, who was a lab baby or a darling of USA during that time, who was simultaneously fighting the US Gulf War against Iran, and later he was declared as an enemy. Talking about ISIS, Barack Obama on record said that ISIS was a creation of because of their doing in Iraq. And whatever armaments or the ammunition that they gave to the rebels in Syria and Iraq, that ended up in the hands of ISIS fighters. But then why blame Muslims for that? I think the answer is that Muslims may be the soft targets, and after the fall of communism, they might be the next vulnerable targets for their great game. Yeah, so in short, when we talk about this, if patriarchy as a system of gender domination is considered or given to be external to the West and located in Islam, it will be a historic distortion. And it's a problematic narrative, which is quite Islamophobic. We need to realize that militarism, patriarchy, and capitalism, and even colonization, it was exported from West to the rest of the world. So what we actually, the current state is when we talk about diversity or multiculturalism, they go out of the window when it comes to Muslims. Look at the educational opportunities, equal rights, labor market, whale ban, or maybe like even when we talk about the Punish a Muslim Day or the Pegida protests. So Islamophobia, it's quite deep rooted in these world visions that have been coming on since the last 6 centuries. What needs to be done, that we need to work on the world vision.